Welcome to episode 250 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing actor and also writer-director James Morosini. He gives a very candid interview about the process of him making the film Threesomething. He's a real artist, very open about the whole process, and not just the nuts and bolts of making the film, but the emotional ups and downs as well. I think this is a big part of indie filmmaking and not something that you hear talked about a lot. So if you're considering doing your own indie film, you're not going to want to miss this interview. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 250. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I'll teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing actor and writer-director James Morosini. Here is the interview. Welcome, James, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
I grew up outside of Boston. Always really loved movies, and I always kind of made stupid little videos with a camera. I had some of my family had been in the business and did really well. And I kind of had always had that person around and really looked up to him. And yeah, I started acting kind of after high school. I didn't really do any, I didn't do a ton of acting in high school, and started doing plays. Went to USC for theater and film, and then have been working as an actor for the past 5 years, on and off, obviously. Mm-hmm. But in between acting jobs, I'm a writer-director, and I produce my stuff and other people's stuff as well.
Okay, perfect. So let's dig into your latest film, Threesomething. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch for the film. What is this film all about?
Sure. A few friends try to have a threesome, and it ruins their lives.
Okay. And where did the idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of this story?
I think the genesis was that I felt like almost all my friendships had parts of them that everything would be good, but there'd always be like one thing that was kind of like we never talked about, or like a vibe that was sometimes weird. Like one person would be calling the other person more, or like, and maybe one person wouldn't want to pick up their calls or whatever. There's always some weird underlying stuff and I noticed in like every relationship I had. And so I wanted to make a movie about kind of the way friendships function and especially between guys, and how guys, I feel like, have an idea of masculinity that many guys have this idea of masculinity that they're trying to uphold, and it limits their ability to be honest with themselves and other people. Mm-hmm. So I just thought the idea of them going, let's have a threesome, and then the reality of what a threesome actually is, where it's not just a fantasy and it's not porn, it's like you're actually doing it, and there's another person involved who has a whole life, and I like the idea of fantasy meeting the hard road of reality.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your writing process a little bit. You've collaborated with another writer, Sam Sunshine, on this project. Maybe you can just describe what that collaboration looked like. Were you guys in the same room writing? Did you guys outline together and then break off, and he took some scenes, you took some scenes, and then you got back together? Maybe just describe that process for us a little bit.
Yeah, man, sure. So I first called Sam with the idea. I was like, let's do, I really want to make a movie. Let's dive in. It was like, cool, man. What's the story? And I just started kind of running vague ideas by him. We both really liked the idea of some friends aspiring to have a threesome and it being completely different than they imagined it would be. And kind of using that as a way into delving into the issues we're experiencing in our 20s. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I think for Threesomething, it was kind of a non-traditional process. It was basically like we had a poster board and we started writing scene ideas on the poster board on sticky notes and sometimes just on the cardboard poster board itself. And then we'd just work for a few hours, go on walks and stuff, come back, put more sticky notes on the poster. Then we'd walk away and then we'd go, oh, what about if we did this or that? And then we'd move some things around and we'd have the poster board set. And we started production very quickly without ever having a paper script. It was always just this poster board. And the crew was small enough where anyone that wanted to know what the full story was, we would literally have them look at the poster board and then explain the story to them.
Huh.
So it was almost like conveyed to everybody involved as like almost spoken word. I remember one of the first times we showed our lead actress Isabel Chester the story. We literally brought the poster board to her house and just excitedly described what we were thinking about the story, and then she would ask some questions, and then we'd go, oh shit, and then we'd have to change some stuff around. Mm-hmm. Because this was a micro-budget production, we had the luxury of just kind of exploring our whim in terms of, like, we're really excited about the story as is, so we would shoot that chronologically, and then I'd edit it, and then we would have that almost be our first draft, that first edit. And then it was a matter of, like, filling in the gaps, seeing what scenes didn't work or what needed to convey more information or where the tone didn't fit or whatever, and then be like reshooting those scenes. And so it was iterative. So there was never like okay, the writing process is done now and we're going to start production. It was like we didn't want to make excuses about not making a movie anymore. So we made it, and then we continued to then rewrite and shoot more, rewrite and shoot more. And so production informed pre-production and writing, and it was kind of all the same process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. How long did you work on this poster board before you actually got into to production?
Very quickly. I'd say a week.
Oh, wow. Wow. And had you done this same process with your short films?
Yeah, I think with my short films, they were more scripted, generally. I don't know why I was so comfortable doing it. I guess I wasn't that comfortable. On this one, we had a group of people that were like, we really want to make a feature, and we really want to go about doing it in this kind of like explorational, experimental way. And we're all we all just want to do it kind of for the love of the game. So we don't need all of that certainty. We don't need the script to be in perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect for us to get other people on board. We had everyone on board already, and we could kind of convey the nuance just verbally to each other.
Yeah. So there was never any like actual dialogue written? Was it ad-libbed?
No, there was a lot of dialogue written on the poster board and on like pages, or sometimes it would be like Sam would be driving us to set, like I'd be sitting in the passenger seat next to Sam or him next to me, and we'd be on our phones and we'd be typing out the dialogue as we drove to set, or for the next day or for the next few scenes. And so we'd have the dialogue when we showed up to set, or we would like text that to the other actors. I mean, it was very scrappy, but I mean, out of necessity, but also by design. There was something about that process that made it all really fresh and exciting, and all like none of us went into it going like, this is what it needs to be. It was like we were all really listening to each other, and it led to this kind of really kind of collaborative and open workflow.
Mm-hmm. Is Sam also an actor?
Yeah. So yeah, Sam is.
Okay, and I wonder if that's not part of your that's part of the thing too, is because you guys had a background in acting, getting in there on set and stuff. Just you have that background in coming up with the dialogue and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that definitely helped, and I think the thing we were both more interested in was what wasn't being said more than what was.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of going back to like the genesis of the idea was like I was interested in what was going on beneath the surface in relationships,
Mm-hmm.
both friends and partners and whatever. And so oftentimes, instead of talking about the details of what would be said, we'd be talking about what's not being said here. And if these two people were to say something to each other, what would they want to say to each other exactly? And then it was a matter of, through the writing, and then also on set, like my direction a lot of times was just like, guys, you're right now, you guys are upset with each other, and you're like, what would happen if you tried to show each other how you're totally fine and it's actually all good, and you said the same words, but you're trying to communicate to the other person that no harm, no foul,
Mm-hmm.
even though there really was.
Yeah, I'm curious, and this is sort of maybe off the beaten path. You mentioned that with all your relationships, there's just always this one little weird vibe. Did you have that with Sam, and was that a way of working through that? It kind of becomes the elephant in the room if that's what you're exploring.
No, 100%. I mean, we went to college together. We studied acting together, and so we were in these classes together, like voice and movement class, where you're like rolling around on the floor, like doing this, like doing these breathing exercises and like throwing your sound across the room and doing all these kind of like, exercises designed to basically make a fool out of yourself. Mm-hmm. Like each person would go up in front of the other in class, and their assignment would be to make as much of a fool out of themselves as they possibly could in that, in a couple minutes. And so there was exercise after exercise designed, or like, hey, do this monologue, but do it as bad as you possibly can. So we've just seen each other humiliated over and over and over, but we weren't really that close. We started out being really close in college, and then for some reason there was miscommunication, and we kind of stopped being close friends. And whenever we would see each other, there was this vibe of like us wanting to connect, but not being sure how to put words to whatever rift had come between us. And so we kind of both pretended it wasn't there, even though it was the most palpable thing in our friendship. And then, we got a coffee after college ended, and I think one of us was like, dude, something you said, like there was an awkward silence. And I think one of us just made the leap and was like, dude, I feel like we were really good friends, and then something happened, and then we stopped being friends. And like, I feel like my feelings got hurt, and your feelings got hurt. And we started talking about it, and just from that conversation forward, we started kind of hanging out every day, because that honesty and that vulnerability and that interaction was so refreshing and so unusual for in my experience, to have with another person, to really just have with any other person. And we really unpacked exactly what was happening and where my head was at, where his head was at, what other stuff was happening in our lives, how we might have taken stuff personally. We really took like a detailed inventory of our interaction. And so that kind of gave us, it kind of aligned both of our hypersensitivities to really have a shared vocabulary when we're talking about what's happening when people interact. And we'd be in social situations, and we'd both be picking up on like a weird thing that was happening, and we'd be like, does anyone else see this right now? Like, isn't this kind of odd? Like, what, this needs to be the thing that we make. Yeah. And so really, like, Threesomething felt like just a feature-long compilation of like all of the stuff we felt was going on in the unspoken, And yeah, I mean, through the process, it was like we would have conflict and we'd kind of let it fester, and then we'd approach it and kind of then, sometimes we'd have the conflict on the day we're shooting a scene. And we'd go, wait, what if this part actually informed the part we're shooting later today, where this is how you feel in that interaction? And so the making of it was really informed by what was just happening in our actual lives a lot of times.
Yeah. So I wonder if, just for context, you're going through this, you can kind of give us some examples. You're going through this process where you shoot kind of a rough version of the film, and then you go in and you realize missing scenes. Maybe talk about, like, what's an example of a missing scene that you felt after you shot a first, you had sort of a rough cut of the movie, and then you had to go back and reshoot something.
Yeah, man, sure. So there's a part where Sam's character gets basically left out of this threesome. And Isabel's character and my character, we're having this, like, we're jumping into, like, really falling in love with each other. Like, but we really just both desperately want to have some connection. So it's kind of manufactured and not. We're both just grasping for this intense connection, just because both of the characters are really lonely. But so we had shot like a whole day of her character and my character, like, connecting and having these great experiences together, and then the movie went a different direction later on. So in the cut, though, that ends up just being 20 minutes of people having these crazy experiences with each other, and there's no context to it. It's like the viewer's attention, it's unclear what the point of view is. So we would often add scenes to help guide the perspective of what was being shown. So it's like, in that instance, it's like, okay, well, where is Sam's character? Well, what if, because he's felt excluded, he's actually been outside the whole time looking in on what's happening? So then it's like, we would come back and shoot all of these interstitials of him being outside the whole time and how he's being affected by it. So then what he does next in the second half of the film is so informed by all of this stuff you've been seeing him experience that's unbeknownst to the other two characters of the film. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes it was a matter of, like, hey, this feels more like an idea. In order to really say something with it, we need to add moments, or we just need to really drive home the perspective of where we're at right now in the film. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Was there any sort of, as you're going through this process, was there any talk of, the marketing of the film, what we're going to do with the film when we're done, genre requirements? Was there any talk of that sort of just more businessy sort of formulaic stuff? Did you ever feel any push to, like, try and make this a little easier to package or easier to sell?
I'm sure there was. We were doing so many of the jobs ourselves. I mean, we were producing it, we were writing it as we were going along, I was directing it, I was also editing it, I was acting in it, and then we were also, like, we're doing all of these jobs. Sometimes we were running sound. It's like, and then, a few other people were helping out. Ben Meserve, our DP, or this kid, these guys from USC, Zachary Braden and Alexander Bologna. These guys would kind of show up, and it was kind of this, like, rotating group of people that was kind of inconsistent, but, like, people would show up when they can, and we'd show them how to use the sound. So there wasn't really a lot of time or leftover energy to really go, okay, well, what's the marketing look like here? And really our intent was just, let's just make this film exactly how we want to make it, and let's make it the best we possibly can, and then let's just worry about all that stuff later. Mm-hmm. Because one of the reasons I hadn't made a film up until Threesomething, a feature film, was just the process felt like it felt so unfamiliar, and it felt so daunting to, like, make a whole feature-length film. So I really tried to just focus on, like, what was right in front of me, and not be overwhelmed by, like, how are we going to market it, or because I think if I stayed scared about those elements before I even got to them, I would probably just go, well, I don't know, so I can't make this film.
Mm-hmm. So was this completely self-funded? You and Sam, basically whatever money you needed, you kicked in yourself?
we a few other people came on board as like executive producers, but I mean, we made this movie for the cost of a used car.
Uh-huh.
That gives you a sense of our budget.
Yeah, and what does the crew look like on something like this? You just mentioned DP and sort of a rotating bunch of people, but I mean, obviously you need a sound guy and a DP. I'd say that's kind of minimum. Is that what you had?
When we were lucky, yeah.
Okay.
You know, so we you know, it'd often be the DP, so it'd be Ben, it'd be our actors, and then it would be somebody usually running sound. But if for whatever reason they had class that day, or we couldn't, or they, you know, something came up with their girlfriend or boyfriend that they had to figure out with them, we'd go, all right, well, we're not pushing the shoot. Let's just figure out a way to record sound ourselves. And so we got really good at using the sound equipment and learning what sounded good, what didn't sound good. And we just decided we're going to put most of our money into the post sound so that we can clean up a lot of the stuff or do ADR when necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, man, a lot of times it was like the actors and the DP. And then sometimes there'd be one or two other people kind of helping out.
Yeah. And so maybe we could talk just a little bit about that. You just mentioned, okay, so you're putting a little bit of this money into the post-production sound. Where else on a micro-budget film like this, where you and your buddy are basically doing as much as possible, where else do you need to spend money, just for people out there that are thinking about doing something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no right or wrong way to do it necessarily. We invested in sound gear so that we wouldn't have to, you know, so we could be as self-reliant as possible, because we had a super committed DP that would be willing to show up every day. But again, we were like, we really want to make this film, so even if our DP hadn't, you know, been a part of it, we would have either rented a camera, or like if we had to, shot it on our iPhones. We were like, let's just do our absolute best at every stage of the process. But in terms of where our budget went, it's like post-sound, we got a great colorist. And the way we'd go about it is just reaching out to our favorite people and then hoping they said yes. But the way I had read a book out of college called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it talks about how 9 out of 10 businesses fail, so you have to start 10 businesses. And I kind of apply that logic to every area of my life when I can, in that 9 out of 10 times are probably not going to work. So you just have to try 10 times. And so I look at, when we're looking for a colorist, I look at it that way, like, so reach out to 10 colorists, or, you know, I look at casting. I look at almost every part of my life and just put out the intention that this is what you want, and then you'll be able to be picky after that, after you've just like decided upon a variety of things you're cool with getting.
Yeah. Okay, so now you're done your film. What were your next steps? You and I connected through a publicist. Did you get the publicist first? Did you find distribution? Did you go the festival route? Maybe you can talk about sort of after you have a completed film a little bit.
So after we were done with the film, and after we had done, after we were done with shooting, we were like, let's get some feedback so we know that we're not crazy, that this is good. So we would have screenings in my apartment. We'd invite all our friends whose opinions we trusted, and we'd have them in my apartment. They would watch the film. Then we'd have questionnaires that we handed out. People would answer a billion questions about what was working, what wasn't. We had a few of those. We then collated all of those notes and then let that inform like a final few day stretch of production. We then incorporated those edits into the film. I think we might have had one more screening after that. Once we were picture locked, we sent it to our color. We brought it to our colorist. We brought it to our sound person, and then the post process was staggered, where it's like, you know, for weeks on end, we were driving to our sound person to kind of oversee the workflow. That part of the process was pretty horrible. I mean, it just was not. Sam and I really didn't enjoy that part of the process. Mm-hmm. But our colorist is unreal, and so that kind of made up for it a lot of the time. and yeah, man. So anyway, we so once we had the final locked version of the film, we then submitted to a bunch of festivals, and and just were like any place where we were like, yeah, that'd be cool to go if our film got in. Then once we heard back, we decided we'd premiere at CineQuest, and so then we made a ton of these. We were like, okay, well, we need to let's try to sell this film. So let's go to Sundance this year, even though we don't have a film, and let's just try to meet distributors. So we did. I met my distributor there at a party, and he was like, send me your film. I was like, okay, dude, see you later. Sent him the film. He was really into it, shared it with his company. They made us an offer. So we went to CineQuest already having an offer, and so what we were thinking was like, well, if someone can beat this offer, great. We'll think about it, or we'll just go with the offer we have. CineQuest is in San Jose. There's not a ton of industry people up there. There's not really any distributors go, so nobody made another offer. And so we ended up going with the one that we had, and it's yeah. And then when we were up at CineQuest, our goal was just fill those theaters. So we were just passing out tons of flyers and trying to get people to commit to showing up to screenings. I mean, dude, it's so much legwork.
Mm-hmm.
Independent film is like 95% just hustle, just going like, and most people are not up for actually doing that legwork. It sounds like a really cool idea, like let's make a feature film, but then when it comes down to it, you're like, you're just every single thing it usually falls on your shoulders or somebody else close to you, their shoulders. And it takes a toll because you're doing so much of it yourself. And then at the end of the day, you're still making a film that doesn't have a ton of money for marketing, doesn't have a huge team behind it to push the film. So even when you release it, it kind of feels like you build up all these expectations by going to places like Sundance or watching those, these huge, way bigger budget indies do really well and stuff, and then you release your film, and it to be totally honest, man, it can be really disappointing because you put it out. I mean, I think Sam's expectations were more measured, but it's pretty anticlimactic. It's like you wait for that release date, and then it comes out on iTunes, a few people review it, and then it just is on iTunes, and you just scroll on the library of iTunes, and there are just thousands of other pictures, and yours is like, it's a drop in the ocean, and it makes you wonder, like, what's the point of me contributing? And that's really been where I've been at for the past few months, is like, well, what do I really want to say that's different than what other people want to say? Mm-hmm. And why do I want to do this other than it just being like fun to do? Because a lot of times it's actually not that fun. It's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. But there are parts that are really rewarding.
Yeah. And I'm totally there with you. I'm actually waiting for my release date on my film. I've got it through the aggregator. There's some technical issues, but it's going to be the same thing. I'm getting ready to push it up to iTunes. And yeah, I'm at that stage too, where the fun is long since worn off. Maybe you can just talk briefly about your talk with this distributor at Sundance and sort of what you did as prep work on that. Did you just try and just crash parties and just chat people up? Hey man, what are you doing? Or who are you? Maybe talk us through that, because I know there's going to be people.
I was like us going to Sundance, being like, we're going to go to all the parties. My manager had sent me a list of all the top parties at Sundance. We're like, dude, we're set. We had some friends that had films there. We're like, we can just go to parties with them. Get to Sundance. We start trying to RSVP for these parties. They're all completely full. And so then we just started going, let's just start showing up at the parties. And so we'd go and they'd be like, yeah, no, you're not on the list, you can't come in. And so we started to get kind of disheartened. And then we would just talk to people at screenings. And then we just started going, then we started meeting people who were like, yeah, dude, just you can be our plus one. Yeah, totally cool. And they'd invite us. We'd go to the parties. And sometimes and then we'd go to these parties, and it was just a lot of the times it's just everybody's hammered, and people are just passing out business card after business card, and it just all kind of feels it feels like bullshit, and especially when you don't have a film there, it's really easy to feel like you're kind of like this weird outsider. Like your insecurities are all off the charts in that environment, or at least mine were. So then I kind of gave up on trying to network or schmooze. I was just hanging out at a party, and I personally don't drink, so I was just kind of standing there going like, wow, this was like, we really went in guns blazing into this, and it's not working out. And I was just like, hey man, I just like said hello to this dude, and he's like, oh hey, what's up, man? And we just started talking, and then we got into like talking about meditation. I think maybe one of us had like an app on our phone. I started telling him about how I went to this 10-day meditation retreat 3 years ago. And then he told me how he had just gone to Burning Man and had kind of a similar spiritual experience. And we just like connected as people, and he didn't even know I was a filmmaker, and I didn't know he was a distributor. And then I was like, so what are you doing here, man? He was like, I work for Gravitas. I'm like, oh, cool, man. I had heard the name a lot. Mm-hmm. Told him about my film. He was like, rad, send it over. So there was really very little prep work. I mean, like from the moment we came up with the film until our release, it's been pretty run and gun, for better and for worse. I don't know if I think I've done it, and it's really exhausting, and it's taxing on everybody involved. I think it can be really rewarding because you make a film, and then you've made a film, and you know how to do it, and it makes you more confident. I love our film. I think it's really good, and I'm very proud of it. But it's also like I think I might want to try doing it. There's benefits to going really fast and just doing it, and then there are benefits to waiting and letting things marinate. There are fallbacks to both of those processes.
Yeah, for sure. So how can people see Threesomething? You just mentioned that it's up on iTunes. Maybe you can just rattle off all the places that it's currently available.
Sure. So it's on iTunes, Amazon. It's on all of the gaming platforms. Oh, okay. It's on Vudu, YouTube, Vimeo, pretty much everywhere. I mean, if you go to our website, threesomethingfilm.com, or my personal website, jamesmorosini.com, you'll be able to find it and order it. And yeah, I think I don't know, in terms of I mean, we've gotten a lot of people reach out to us that really liked it. And I don't think that's an indicator of anything. But
yeah. So what's next for you? You're done this movie, and it's out there. What are you looking at to do next as a director and writer?
Yeah, I have a TV show that I created that I'm really excited about. And then I have a movie that I wrote about my experience growing up outside of Boston called Acne. I grew up with horrible cystic acne on my face. And I was also obsessed with mafia movies, Goodfellas, and stuff like The Sopranos and Scarface and all that. And I had posters all over my room. And when I was about 13 or 14, I started selling pot. And I got caught by the local police department. And they really came down on me pretty hard. So the movie kind of looks back at that time of life, and it kind of explores the insecurities and social anxieties of a 14-year-old kid trying to figure out who he is, and then deciding, oh, I'm a gangster. I'm kind of like these guys in these mafia movies. So he wears suits to school, slicks his hair back, and then, gets in over his head in some ways. It's basically, it feels like a movie like 8th Grade or Lady Bird, where it's this really sensitive film, but it's told it's told basically by the kid as if he's trying to be in a gangster movie. So it has a similar structure to Goodfellas.
Okay, perfect. What's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook. You mentioned your website. I'll link to that as well. But anything you're comfortable sharing, I'll round up for the show notes.
Yeah, I'd say hit me up on Instagram, Morosini Tortellini. Hit me up on Twitter if you want, James Morosini. Facebook, my website is jamesmorosini.com.
Perfect.
That pretty much covers it.
Okay, well, perfect, James. I really appreciate you coming on the show today and talking with me. I can't remember an interview where the filmmaker was so candid. I really appreciate people that come on and want to share like the real things and really get to the bottom of this stuff. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Yeah, this was really fun. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thank you. We'll talk to you later.
All right, brother.
Bye.
Bye.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer-director Jeremy Wechster. He just did a thriller film called E-Demon, which is a micro-budget feature. It's a great example of going out there and making things happen. And we talked through his background, his entire process, and how he got to the point where he was ready to make this first feature film. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with James. I really want to thank James for coming on and being so open and honest about his experience with this film. A lot of success in the entertainment business feels very anticlimactic. We work so hard to achieve certain goals, and then when we achieve them, it's not always quite what we had hoped. And maybe that's just all with everything in life. I've certainly had these moments of despair with The Pinch, but I think the key for me is knowing the alternative, which at least for me is selling a script and then having no real creative control over it once it gets into production. So doing The Pinch, while there's definitely some ups and downs, it definitely was a creatively very fulfilling project for me. And I think that makes some of the desperation that you go through with these large projects more tolerable. At least I know that I'd rather be making my own films than just selling scripts. Not that I'm not still out there trying to sell scripts, but it's also nice to have this creative release where I can just produce my own work. Also, and this is a really big part of it as well, is that I really enjoyed the process. I genuinely enjoyed the process of making The Pinch. So therefore, the results become less important. I put less emphasis on the results because the process of making it was fun for me. So I think that's also very, very, very key. The journey is most of the process. Those ups and downs, the producing, the writing, getting it together, the editing, the post-production. Those are not necessarily the things we think about when we think about successful films, but that's really the 99% of the process. You know, collecting the awards, getting the adulation, that's a very small part of the process. So hopefully you're not just in it for that. Hopefully the whole filmmaking process, or if you just want to be a screenwriter, hopefully the writing process is something that you genuinely enjoy and get something out of it creatively, so that even if these projects don't turn out ultimately how you envision them or how you would like them, you've still gotten something of value out of them. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.